This video is sponsored by Squarespace, the all-in-one platform for building your brand and growing your business online. Hey everyone, welcome back to Reissued. If you're new here, my name is Andrew. Today we're going to be doing a DIY faux tile treatment on the fireplace in my living room using only latex paint and UV resin. Now, if you know anything about me or my channel, you know that I don't love to do any kind of faux treatment unless I can make it look really convincing and high quality. So I'm already putting the pressure on myself to make this look good. I also have never seen anyone else use this technique before. If someone else out there has done this, please let me know. I would love to see what they did. Maybe the same, maybe differently. So I am really going out on a limb here. I really hope this works. Let's find out, shall we? Okay, before we get started today, my big living room reveal is coming up so soon on my channel. I think this is gonna be the last video that we do in the living room before the reveal. So if you're not already subscribed, now is a great time to hit the subscribe button and be sure that you don't miss the final reveal for the space. So just to give some context for this project, I have 4 fireplaces in my house. The one in the bedroom, we did completely tear out everything that was there down to the brick, I believe, if I remember correctly, and down to like what was essentially a sand pit in the hearth. It was so much work to get all of that taken apart and built back up again to get the tile on there. Similarly, in this room, the studio, the tile that was on the fireplace was kind of busted and only partially there. So we took everything off there as well and have been in the process of tiling that. It's been sitting unfinished for like almost 2 years now. Again, the hearth area was complicated here because there's different levels going on. With all of these fireplaces, the chimneys are a little bit crumbly and damaged, so we're trying not to disturb any of the grates or bricks or anything. These, I believe, were coal burning fireplaces, and again, since the chimneys are damaged, these are no longer functional, and they were filled in with insulation foam and other things, I guess, to improve the heating and cooling of the house and also keep out some critters, I would expect. So here in the living room, we were really blessed with a completely flat surface on the surround as well as the hearth. So conceivably, these should be an ideal candidate for tiling. However, the hearth is completely flush with the floor and the surround is almost flush with the little grate that's inserted there. So basically, if we were to tile on top of this, it would be raised up above the floor and also come out possibly slightly past that little grate on the inside, which would look super weird. I decided that the best thing here was to go in and paint some tiles on here and then go on top of them with UV resin, both to give the tiles a very glossy finish to simulate that kind of glazed tile look, but also give it that slightly raised edge as tile would naturally have with the grout lines in between. Now, in terms of color, I went back and forth on this a bit. Matt suggested that we do a really deep green color to kind of pull that color from the rug. Also, a lot of the vintage kind of Victorian fireplaces that I was looking at had this nice dark green. However, I was worried that we might have too many elements happening in the room. After the mural wallpaper went in, we have a lot of color, a lot of pattern, a lot of texture, so I don't want to overdo this. So then I was thinking maybe more of a kind of brown shade just to kind of blend with the wood on the fireplace would be better. However, I did put up a poll over on Instagram and most people liked the green, and so we're gonna go with the green. So one of my recently unearthed talents is finding exactly the color that I'm looking for in the Oops section at Lowe's. So I've been sort of looking at this swatch of 1905 green from Magnolia, and I went to Lowe's the other day with my parents to pick up some other things, and we looked in the Oops paint. You've always got to take a look, and I saw this shade that looked pretty close to what I was looking for. We wanted that kind of deep green shade with a little bit of blue, almost teal vibes. So I bought it for $7 and brought it home and compared it to my swatch, and it's pretty freaking close. Look at that. So yesterday I did some tests to see whether or not my theory was gonna work. I tested the paint colors. I used that original Oops paint shade and then also mixed in some other shades as well. These are the same paints that we used on the wall mural. I mixed in a bit of Prairie Smoke, which is a dark gray shade to kind of desaturate and deepen this. I also tried mixing the shade Cognac to make this shade a little bit more of a yellow green. And then I also tried mixing with Coffee Nook to make this a little bit more blue. So we have some variations here to play with. The idea is that I want the tile to have that kind of variegated look that looks like a vintage hand glazed kind of tile. So I just wanted to see some options for layering on top of the base color. Then I went in and tested my resin. We gotta see if this is gonna work. So this is UV resin that I got on Amazon. I believe it was like $12 for this pack of like 4 little bottles. I had no idea how much I was gonna use for this. I tend to overbuy and then have a bunch of leftover stuff. So I bought kind of a moderate amount and I can always order more if I need more down the line. With a lot of epoxy resin, you have to mix different parts together and do a little potion action and pour it, and it heats up and it has to set for a certain period of time. However, with UV resin, you essentially just squeeze it out of the tube and then put a UV light on it that cures it in just a couple of minutes. This is gonna be really important in our case because we're gonna have to apply this vertically, and this stuff does kind of wanna gradually run, so I don't know for sure that this is gonna work. However, the theory here is that we'll apply the UV resin with the brush and cure it very quickly before it starts to run at all. And after my tests, I think this looks pretty awesome. It's very smooth, very glossy. I did get a couple of air bubbles in there, so I want to watch for those when I actually apply this. But in theory, I think this could work really well. So fingers crossed here. So we're gonna do this whole thing in 2 passes, one on just the fireplace surround area. That way I can sit on the hearth and not be worried about disturbing any of my work. Then once we get that entire area done, we'll move on to the hearth. So I started by prepping the surround with a bonding primer. The paint that was on here was a semi-gloss finish, and I just want to make sure we get a good bond on top of that. So this is just gonna fill everything in and hopefully give the paint on top a good grip. Now, the little metal insert in the center, I was thinking I was gonna wait and paint that at the end, but I think we're gonna go ahead and do that now so we don't have this glaring white staring at us the whole time. I'm gonna paint this with a heat-resistant black paint, the same as I used in the bedroom. Again, this fireplace is not gonna be functional, so the heat-resistant paint wasn't really necessary, but I had this on hand, and so I think it's gonna be good here. Now, one more thing that I didn't fill you in on, this fireplace is one of the worst offenders in terms of having lots of visible insulation inside. So I thrifted this metal grate at the REISSUED for $25, I think. This was a couple of months back. Someone brought in a bunch of really beautiful fireplaces. I guess they were effectively stripping all the character out of their home, which, you know, their loss, my gain. So this grate is beautiful, but it was really busted. The corner of it was broken, which I didn't even really know at the time because it was all covered in tape. So my dad is awesome, and he did some repairs on this for me. First, he cut a little piece of sheet metal that's gonna rebuild this corner and give it that clean 90-degree edge. He glued this on the backside with E6000 glue so that it has a strong hold. Then he mixed up a 2-part Bondo type product. This is like a 50-to-1 ratio. You use the putty and then the little thing out of the tube, mix it until it's an even consistency, and then he applied this evenly all across that area to build it up to the same level as the rest of the surface. This is pretty tricky to do without a mold, so he built it up a lot and then sanded away all of the excess to make it nice and smooth with everything else. There were still some little jagged edges around the outside, but I think that that's gonna actually make it look more like the rest of the grate since this thing is a little bit crumbly, so we're gonna go with that. However, the dry putty was pulling away from the sheet metal, so he used more E6000 to secure those together. And once he cleaned this up with a wire brush, removing any little extra debris or rust, then I can go ahead and paint this with that same black heat-resistant paint to match it perfectly to the little metal surround. Now let's start penciling in my tile pattern. Now, in terms of pattern, I have a hard time when I DIY something like this. It feels like if I'm gonna be doing this from scratch, I should do something super unique that I couldn't find anywhere or buy anywhere. However, again, we're kind of maxing out on the amount of color and pattern in the room right now. So we're gonna keep this really simple, and I'm gonna draw inspiration from this specific fireplace. This has that kind of Victorian look, but it's just from like a tile brand's website. But what I really like about this is that we have that mini subway tile kind of look, but we also have these little square details tail tiles that are inset right at the top as well. I don't love the kind of medieval floral motif on this, so I'm gonna come up with something different just for those 2 feature tiles. But otherwise, in terms of pattern and color, I think this look is gonna be good in here. The design I'm referencing on the tile website came with a very handy diagram with dimensions and everything. Based on the dimensions of my fireplace, I scaled things down a bit so that my tiles were 1.5 inches by 3 inches with 1/8 inch spaces in between, and I think those proportions work pretty well. Or so I thought. Now, I love my house, but sometimes I feel like my house hates me. I spent so much time getting the design right for this, and I got one side totally drawn in, and then I went over to the other side and realized that it's a whole inch smaller on that side. The grate is apparently not centered in the middle of where the mantle is. At this point, I think I'm gonna need to simplify and just do the running bond with the accent tiles, but the border around the outside was one of the things that I really liked about my inspiration, and otherwise it feels kind of boring. So I'm gonna walk away from this and think on this and come back with a plan and better attitude. Even though it turned out to be super tedious, this project was all about creating the simplest solution for achieving a legitimate, convincing, professional look, kind of like Squarespace, which is the sponsor of today's video. Squarespace is the perfect platform for taking complicated tasks like building a website, sharing your products, managing customers and inventory, creating an email blast, and making those tasks super simple. When I'm painting hundreds of tiles by hand, I don't have time to learn to do any of those things. And Squarespace's tools and templates are really intuitive and make it look like I know what I'm doing even if I don't. Most recently, I created this little email capture on my site to make it quick and easy to opt into exclusive channel news and promotional offers on my products. So check out squarespace.com for a free trial, and when you're ready to launch, use my code REISSUED for 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. Thank you so much to Squarespace for sponsoring this video and for helping me take my basic skills and turn them into a clean, professional product, kind of like this tile project. Okay, so the next day I had finally let go of my border tile design and was ready to simplify and just go with the running bond pattern with the 2 accent tiles. So I finished drawing things in and got to painting. I'm gonna lay down a base coat with the Oops paint first and then worry about creating some color variation later. Now, this paint seemed really watery without great coverage, although I wonder if I just hadn't mixed it well enough because it was better later on in the process. Either way, the coverage wasn't great here. However, I focused on getting the edges covered super well, since I wanted those to read as sharp and dark to create that tile effect. Here, I'm using an angled brush to help me achieve those super squared off corners. A round brush wouldn't work as well for that. But I'm allowing some of the edges to be a bit irregular and some of the corners to be a bit rounded for more of that handmade tile effect. Better to lean into the imperfections and go that route rather than working too hard to make everything perfect. And once my tiles are painted, I go back into the grout lines with my prairie smoke shade to give a gray grout effect. This didn't cover perfectly in one coat either, but in the end, that helped to show a bit more definition between the tiles and almost appears like a shadow around each tile. Alright, so base coat is done and I'm feeling really good about how everything is looking. It reads really nicely from a distance, but if we get in close, we still see a lot of brush strokes because that paint was pretty translucent. So now I'm going to go in and mix a couple different colors together to add some variations here, some lights, some darks, some more blue tones, some more green tones, and hopefully that's going to maintain the kind of look that we have, but make it look a little bit better up close because the clear resin is pretty unforgiving in terms of masking any brush strokes or anything. So I'm going to mix up some colors and see how this goes. Here I'm working with one color at a time, filling in the patchy areas and trying to create a nice hand-glazed tile effect. Following the color mix recipes I made during my testing stage, I start with the dark gray-green, then move into the blue-green, and then I finish with the more yellow-green. I'm trying to randomly choose tiles to paint so that there's no discernible pattern, but evenly distribute the shades across the whole area so that it feels balanced. Now we need to create a design for our 2 feature tiles. I wanted something simple and geometric, so I was kind of thinking something Art Deco, but then that felt like it might fight with the kind of Victorian look that we have going on. So I found more Victorian references. Ultimately, I made a snap decision to keep it really simple and go with this concentric circle design to add some curves and to reference the rosettes on the woodwork throughout the house. So I traced a circle from the bottom of the spray paint can that was the right size for the largest circle. Then I evenly cut it down to create my smallest circle inside. Now I mixed up a lighter shade of green and started painting over my lines, adding a third line in between the other two for more detail and interest. And while I had that shade in my brush, I also added some highlights to some other random tiles, watering down the paint a bit more for some subtlety. Finally, I muddied up my circles a bit with the darker colors to soften the effect, dabbing away excess paint with a paper towel to achieve the effect I wanted. I love how this looks. If you get up close, you can see all the detail, but from far away, it reads pretty solid so that it's not going to overwhelm the room. So now it's time for resin. Mask and gloves on, and we're ready to go. I ended up picking up some silicone brushes to apply this with, since the resin won't stick to silicone even after it's cured. Plus, this one had pretty squared off edges and was a great size for my tiles. The best technique I found for applying the resin to the vertical surface was to squeeze a little from the bottle onto my tile, and then paint it over the area, being careful not to leave any pools that might drip. Then I can set it very quickly with the UV light. I don't know for sure how long this stuff needs under the light to fully cure. The instructions say a couple minutes, but I know that depends on how thick the application is. Again, my layers are super thin, so it seems to cure in seconds. So in order to speed things up, I started applying to more tiles before setting with the UV light for a couple seconds to lock things in place and prevent any dripping. Then later, I went back in with the light over larger areas for longer to set everything more completely. I will say that this stuff was not likely to run outside of the areas where I applied it unless it was super thick and created a drip, so I was able to leave it on for a bit without curing it at all, and it wouldn't run outside the lines. It would kind of pool along the bottom, which honestly was pretty good for achieving the raised edge look of a real tile, so all in all, this was pretty simple and incredibly effective at achieving that tile look. The only catch is that this took forever. Why does everything always take longer than I think it's gonna take? After completing the whole area, I went back in one more time with another coat to help create a more even surface over the whole tile. That more even glossiness was needed to really sell the tile effect, even though I was so bored doing this at this point. But with the surround finally done, it was time to move on to the hearth. So let's start from the very beginning. Alright, new day. It feels like we're starting from the very beginning again now that we're doing the hearth, but I'm gonna knock out as much of this as I can. I'm hopeful that it'll be faster this time. One, because I kind of know what I'm doing, and two, because we'll be on a flat surface, so I won't have to worry about the resin dripping as much. Maybe I can layer it up a bit more and not have to go in with the second coat. But yeah, you know the drill now. Let's do it all again. I decided to bring back the border design that I wanted on the surround down onto the hearth with longer 4.5-inch tiles around the outside to help define the area a bit and match the scale of the larger surface. So while we continue on the hearth following the steps that I've laid out before, I'm gonna take this opportunity to give you a couple channel updates. First of all, I mentioned at the start of the year that my sister Katie would be helping me kind of grow some business aspects of my channel. You may have noticed that a lot with more sponsorships and partnerships, which is awesome. We're also looking for other ways to expand, and I'm wanting to get more content up on my Instagram and Facebook. I'm just not as active there as I could be, and I just feel like I'm pouring so much effort into YouTube right now that I don't really have time for much else, and that's kind of how I want it to be. So the Reissue team is hiring right now. I'm looking for someone to do some editing for more short form content on YouTube and Instagram, taking things that I've already done here on my channel and making them feel friendly for those other platforms. So if you're interested in joining the Reissue team doing editing and social media content, I will drop the hiring link down in the description box below. I would love to work with someone that's already familiar with my channel and my voice, so that would just be amazing if I could find someone here. So if you're watching this, go apply down below. Also, last week I got a bunch of new subscribers. Benji Plant, who's a creator out in LA, he has like 500,000 subscribers, mentioned in one of his videos that he was watching my channel and that he saw the mural video, which is super cool. Thank you so much, Benji Plant, for shouting me out. But I thought that was such a wonderful thing that he was wanting to share some smaller creators that he was watching with his audience. And so I would love to hear from you guys, both because I would love to share, but also because I would love for myself, who are some smaller creators right now that you're watching, either within the DIY space or not, maybe just in general. It's hard to discover new creators here with the way that the YouTube algorithm is set up. So if you have anybody that you're loving right now, just drop their channel down in the comments below. I would love to see who you're watching. And final update here is that next week we are doing the bedroom makeover on Katie's bedroom in Florida. I'm wrapping up everything for this video and trying to get things to go there. It's very overwhelming because, when I'm doing a makeover in my space, I can kind of gradually bring things in and see what the room needs. But there, I'm just kind of guessing. I don't know, I guess I just feel like I like working at my own pace and seeing things come together a little at a time, and this just feels like, okay, this is the one, move everything in, it's gotta look good, and that's a little scary. So hopefully things will be good for that, but definitely look out for that video next week. We love a bedroom makeover video, so be sure that you're subscribed so you don't miss that for sure. Even though this area was a bit bigger with many more tiles, I felt like the whole process went a little quicker since I already knew what I was doing. I could draw my lines across the whole area without any obstructions, and no longer having to apply the resin to a vertical surface was a game changer. I could apply it directly to the surface and lay it on a bit thicker. I could do larger areas without stopping to set it since I wasn't fighting gravity. And yet, I was still at this for way longer than I wanted or expected, but what else is new? Alright everybody, it is reveal time. I'm very excited with how this project turned out. It did take way longer than I wanted it to, or that I really had time for it to, but I think it's worth it. I think it looks incredible, and I'm super excited about this hack. This was so affordable. I spent $7 for the paint, and then I used other paint that I had, and then I think I spent like $12 on the resin and maybe $20 on the UV light, which of course I can use over and over again if I choose to do this project again. And I think the silicone brushes were like $5 for a pack of 5, and I used like 1. So altogether, this was a super budget-friendly project. I would not recommend doing this on a large surface area like a backsplash or something because it would just be so tedious. But I think if you want to do like a little tile top table effect, or if you have an old fireplace like mine, I think this is such a beautiful way of achieving a really great effect in a way that's low cost, and also wouldn't change the depth, which tends to be an issue if you're doing a tile top table. Like, what do you put around the edges to cover the sides of the tiles, right? So I can't wait to hear what you think about this project. Be sure to leave it down in the comments below. Be sure that you're subscribed so that you don't miss Katie's bedroom makeover next week. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys soon.